specifically Abd I can't say these names. Abd Al-Malik ibn Marwán? Yeah, Acanthecephala. Yeah, it's right here. Can you pronounce Accentuala? So let's begin. First we have Alto Aalvar, a Finnish architect, and that's about all that's relevant for him. Then we have Aaron, a figure from the Bible. After Aaron is Abbas the First, specifically of the Thábit dynasty. Now, entry 4, 5, and 6 all have very strange names that I would rather not like to pronounce.
But I will.
Abd Al-Malik ibn Marwán? Yeah. He did a lot of stuff, conquered some things. Yeah. Abd Al-Mu'min? He was a Berber king. I know about as much as that means. And Abd Ar-Rahmán An-Nasir III. Specifically Ar-Rahmán An-Nasir. I can't say these names. These names are old. Abd Ar-Rahmán An-Nasir, he was the first caliph of Spain, of the Umayyad dynasty as well. Entry number 7 is Abdelkader. Yeah, I think I said it right. He was born in 1808. Fairly recently-ish, since the other guys were like 1,000 years ago. He was a military leader as well as the head of the Muslim Brotherhood. Abdelkader was a military leader as well as being the head of the Muslim Brotherhood in Medina. Abduh Muhammad, I'm gonna go with Abduh, but that's probably wrong. So Abduh Muhammad was one of the Muslim intellectuals who was able to help reconcile the teachings with the modern science advancements being made in the West and in the Islamic Empire. He was apparently exiled from Egypt for a time. Okay, and then of course number 9 we have Abel. Yeah, all these names are weird, but I'm gonna say this is probably Abel. So Niels Henrik Abel. So at number 9 we have Niels Henrik Abel. Abel was born in Savoy. Abel was born in Savoy. Abel was born. Oh my gosh. Abel was born in Savoy. I'm gonna stop trying to name. He was born somewhere in Norway. What is wrong with my voice? And even though his father died when he was young, he was able to establish a reputation for himself and get a scholarly education at university. And then we have Peter Abelard, was the most famous and most controversial teacher of his age. He was a logician, a moral philosopher, and a theologian. Most of those words probably go over your head just as much as they go over my head. I think I know what a theologian is. I know what a philosopher is, but only because I think that's really interesting. I have no idea what a logician is. And everyone knows what a teacher is. And then of course coming in at the number 11, the glorious number 11, we have Abraham. Just Abraham. He's a biblical figure. He's a very important biblical figure. At number 12, we have abrasives. Now, abrasives are not acids. I initially thought they were acids. No, abrasives are things like sandpaper, rocks, and basically anything that you can use to like if I had a thing. Imagine I have a thing and I want to shave it down. Abrasives are used to like rub it and smooth edges and cut things. They're actually really important for manufacturing, apparently, as I've learned by reading this section. Then of course we have Abu Hanífah at number 13. He was a 8th century geologian. Oh my gosh. Then of course we have Abu Hanífah. He was an 8th century theologian and jurist. As a jurist, he reviewed a lot of the legal doctrines and managed to integrate them into a coherent system. There are some great people crusading against the tides of chaos within the legal system, and I could not be more bored by that. It's kind of like programming to me, where it takes a skill set that I currently do not have. Yeah, he was a legal scholar person in the Muslim Empire, I think. Wait, in Thábit. Wait, no, that's his full name. Holy moly, he had a long name. Then of course, finally, we have a word that no one has ever heard of, except for some weird people. Acanthecephala. Yeah, it's right here. Can you pronounce Accentuala? I've already messed up a lot of pronunciations today. These are worms. This word means worms. Spiny-headed worms that constitute the phylum Acanthecephala. There are about 600 recorded species, all of which are parasites. Interestingly enough, they're bisexual and they mate in the intestines and in the intestines of the host. The eggs are excreted and then the eggs have to be eaten in order to develop into more Acanthecephala fans. Yeah, Acarina. Acarina, it's not spelled like that, but it's spelled like this. Acarina are mites and ticks, very much related to spiders and scorpions and harvestmen, and they constitute the Acarina. I just love saying the name Acarina. So the Acarina is part of the arthropod class. They're sort of arachnids, but they're not defined specifically as arachnids. Particle Accelerator is a device that produces a beam of electrically charged atoms or subatomic particles, and that's used for like studying what exactly happens when you accelerate things to different speeds. Let's just skip to a sentence here. Microtrons have been constructed with energies up to a few tens of MeV, but the V is capitalized. I'm sure that means something to physicists. They have the advantage that the beam is guided out of the magnetic field. For this reason, they are used as injectors for electronic synchrotrons. Sorry, the word synchrotrons. Okay, so there's a lot of jargon here. That sentence, I only read half the paragraph. That's enough to understand what they're talking about. I don't. Number 16, acclimatization. Now, acclimatization is when a creature, perhaps a human, goes to a climate and becomes acclimated, there we go, becomes acclimated to that climate. Now, every living organism is able to adjust itself to different climates, otherwise it would just die outside of its native special climate. However, different organisms have preferred climates. Most climates are defined by their temperature. Some are hot, some are cold, some are colder, some are really cold, some are just burning hot. All these different climates, they let life live in different temperatures. However, another thing worth noting is that there's more types of climate than just temperature. There's also illumination. For example, this is the weirdest thing, but in Britain, due to the amount of rain and cloudiness, people of African descent, they are not getting as much sunlight as they need. Their genetics are derived from a place where there was a lot more sunlight. Their bodies have adjusted to absorb a lot more sunlight. And so, sadly, this means that they die, which is sad. It's like, white people, I guess, when they, white-skinned, pale people, here we go, pale people, when they go to, like, the Caribbean, Hawaii, I don't know where the hot places are, they go to a really hot, sunny place, they get sunburned. The Irish get notoriously super sunburned. You wouldn't really want to live in a place that's super dark, like a cave, but you might if it was lit up. You wouldn't want to live in a place that was always daytime, like Antarctica. There are other reasons not to live in Antarctica, though. And then, of course, adjustments in chemicals. Now, for example, there are people who have adapted to live in New York. I don't understand how they can do that, but they've managed to adapt themselves to live in New York and be happy about it. And I am more points for you. I would not be able to breathe. But the last type of acclimatization is air pressure. Now, this is really interesting because the Incans lived along the mountains, and they lived all along the mountains. And there was, I think, another civilization that was slightly different that lived another line. And so, like, people adapt. They, for whatever reason, the cultures in general adapt to being in certain environments and preferring those environments. And then they don't want to leave because their armies aren't going to want to live in the areas that they go and conquer because they're used to a different air pressure. This is an interesting historical theory to explain why certain empires spread out in the ways they did, and I really like it. A group of people who live in the mountains are not going to want to go conquer the area below because the air pressure is different. They're not going to want to live down there, and the people who live down in the mountain, down in the mountains, down below the mountains, aren't going to want to go conquer up in the mountains because the air pressure is different. And obviously, individuals can break this rule, and so you could have raiding bands of people doing that, but they're not going to go live and settle down there, which is what, like, that's what a lot of the empire spreading was. Yeah. And then after acclimatization, we have the principles of accounting. Right. The purpose of accounting is to provide information about the economic affairs of a company or some kind of organization. Could be anything, like a government, just anything that has money and uses it and wants to record it. And this is even like the mafia had accountants because they needed to track how much money they had and what was going on, because being organized is really important. Then we have Accra. Now, Accra, at number 20, wait, I'm just going to put the number next to it and go with that. Accra is the capital of Ghana, and Ghana is a place in Africa. I knew that without reading it. I know my countries. And when the Portuguese first settled on the coast of Ghana, the location that we now call Accra was a place where a bunch of villages were. And so the Portuguese decided that they wanted a city there. So they built one, I assume. Then the next one we have acid-based reactions and Equilibria. Don't know what it means either. Acids are chemical compounds that show in water solution a sharp taste, a corrosive action on metals, and the ability to turn certain blue vegetable dyes red. Bases are chemical compounds that in a solution are soapy and turn vegetable dyes blue. Okay. When mixed, acids and bases neutralize one another and produce salts, substances with a salty taste, and none of the characteristics or properties of either acids or bases. I did not know any of that, but that's fascinating. And of course, it goes on for a little while because it's, that's a lot of science. I will get a quick clip of this. Well, anyway, physics people ought to know what they're looking at. Probably chemists, not physicists. They're not going to know what they're talking about. Next up, we have acoustical engineering. Acoustical engineering is actually something I learned about when I was like 8. Because we moved into this house, and in the ceiling, I'm going to show you a clip of the ceiling. In the ceiling are these little dots, and I always thought it was dumb that my ceiling was a bumpy little ceiling. It wasn't like a nice smooth ceiling, and I always felt like the little dots were going to be falling on me. And I also thought it was like just some bad painter had painted with too much paint and the paint was dripping down, which might have been how they got it, but it wasn't because they were bad painters. No, the purpose of these little bumps on the ceiling is to mess with the sound. So if there's a lot of noise going on in one place, it doesn't translate as easily across the house. If someone's doing something loud in the kitchen, and I'm all the way in my room, in space, they're not actually that far away, but the sound doesn't travel through the hallways as well as you might think. Next up, we have the Acre. I'm just kidding, it's Acre. I know what an acre is. No, it actually is Acre. Oh my gosh, I didn't actually read the entry first. Acre is a state in the northern region of Brazil. Acre covers the southwesternmost parts of Brazil, the forest zone of the Amazon River Basin. It's bounded by the Amazonas. Are you freaking kidding me? There's a place in Brazil called the Amazonas. That's awesome. Okay, anyway, it's a state in Brazil. It has borders with Peru and Bolivia, and it was made by the Portuguese. So there's that. It's like a region. It's like you know, in the US you got Texas, you got California, you got New Mexico. You know, in Bolivia you got Acre, Amazonas. Some names are better than other names. Next up we have acting, a thing that I am very good at. Now, whether on stage or in film or television, no matter what medium it is performed on, acting has been part of our culture forever. Because people need to eat, and people who need to eat gotta eat. Old people gotta be able to do something, so they act. Just kidding. That's not where acting came from. Now, over time, there has been a question of whether or not actors are artists or interpreters of art. Because the actor is not creating the thing that they are acting, usually. Actors bring life to the character they portray. I think most actors would say that they bring significant creative power to the role that they play, and I would agree with that. So I think it's fairly moot. But according to this book, it's a controversy, and I guess most writers would say that they bring significant or creative power to the play because they literally wrote the thing. So, who knows? And then of course we have Lord Acton. Now, aside from having an awesome name, I should probably steal that for D&D, Lord Acton was an English moralist and historian who, even though he was a Catholic by tradition and by inclination, was firmly opposed to the doctrine of papal infallibility, which was formulated by the Vatican in 1870. Wow, that's really recent. He spent much of his time in the US and Europe, then he returned to England to settle down at his family seat in Aldenham, and was elected to the House of Commons for Carlisle in Shropshire. What is with these English names? Carlisle and Shropshire. He believed that rigorous scientific study would ultimately strengthen the Catholic Church, and Christian doctrine would be harmonized with the findings of history. That there wouldn't need to be a contradiction between Catholic teachings and history. He didn't believe that looking at and finding evidence of these things was going to mean that the world wouldn't be able to align to these Catholic doctrines. He thought they could live harmoniously. That's freaking cool. Good enough. We're gonna go with this. So, at number 25 we have Adam Robert, or Robert Adam. Now, Robert Adam was an architect, you see, and similar to Alto Aalvar, this encyclopedia seems to put a lot of emphasis on architects without explaining why architects are so important. I understand architecture being important, but why all these random architects? Like, Adam Robert, he didn't do much. He really didn't do much. He traveled around for a while. He was he has an interesting story, but in terms of his contributions to, like, architecture, this entry does not give a very solid argument for why he should be in this book in the first place. He was a wealthy aristocrat kid who, I mean, like, especially for his time, he was wealthy. He had the ability to travel. He managed to build things. A lot of them got torn down. I mean, honestly, I'll put it like this. The story, what is written here, would be a very interesting story. I think I could enjoy watching a movie about Adam Robert. I don't know if this entry proves him to be a relevant figure in history, but it's certainly an interesting entry.